Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox, 1231 on the East Coast, 931 on the West Coast, and you are taking a live look over the Israel-Gaza border at this hour. We continue to follow a developing story out of this region as a senior official with Yemen's Houthi rebels releasing a statement saying the terror group demonstrated its ability to strike sensitive targets in Israel after a ballistic missile struck inside the area of Ben Gurion Airport. The Israel Defense Forces and aerial defense systems failing to intercept that missile, bringing airport operations to a halt as everyone there ran for cover. The head spokesperson for the Iran-backed terror group warning airlines not to operate in Israel, saying they are doing so at their own risk. All of this coming as a fourth round of nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran was postponed this weekend, with Iran defending its, quote, right to enrich uranium. Iran's foreign minister saying Iran has every right to possess the full nuclear fuel cycle as the U.S. and other Western allies accuse Iran of pursuing nuclear weapons. A lot to discuss here, so I do want to bring in Ben Talablu, a great friend of the show, the Iran program senior director and a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. Another busy day.
Great to be with you, Josh. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, well, first off, I do want to discuss further the delay here of what would have been the fourth talks between the U.S. and Iran. So can you break down why Iran might be dragging their feet and really what that could mean for the talks overall?
Well, there's a couple different things to note up front here is that there are some unconfirmed reports that the fourth round of talks could be held as early as mid to late next week. So it might be postponed rather than indefinitely delayed. The public U.S. position was that at the end of round three, which included both the third round of political talks and first round of technical talks, that they had never agreed to the new date. The Iranians later said that the Americans were incorporating too many other points or factors or issues into the talks and therefore had pushed away from the table. But it looks like both sides may be reconvening. We just don't have officially confirmed what city, what country, and what date yet. But I think that will soon change within the next few hours. Ultimately, the Islamic Republic of Iran is looking not just to buy time, but to be able to blunt the Trump administration's maximum pressure sanctions. It's very interesting to note, for example, you haven't seen major changes in the oil export volume number of the Islamic Republic. That could be because the Chinese are buying more as they expect more sanctions to bite a bit later on. That could be because the Iranians are rushing to export what they have. But I will recommend your viewers do take a look at a editorial board story in the Wall Street Journal just yesterday, which has largely been supportive of Trump's Iran policy, now beginning to question at what point will these maximum pressure sanctions take effect.
Going into all of that just a little bit deeper here, what is the end game for the U.S., for Iran, for the regions involved themselves? What is the end game when you talk about these U.S. and Iran nuclear talks?
Ultimately, the long game for the Islamic Republic of Iran is survival. You know, this is an Islamist authoritarian regime that has been repressing a secular nationalist population and exporting its revolution abroad militarily for the past 4 decades. It's a country that says when it says death to America, it means it. It's a regime that when it says death to Israel, it means it. You've seen how it's taken advantage of the various battlefields and conflict zones and failed states in the pre and post October 7 Middle East. So here they're using talks to do a 180, to limp along, to outlast the Trump administration, and to survive max pressure 2.0, just like they did 1.0. Now, that doesn't mean they won't strike a deal. It actually means instead that they're looking to tempt the Trump administration by talking about a potential $1 trillion economic opportunity, by talking about an opportunity for peace in the Middle East, to be able to kind of get back into the same or lesser fatally flawed agreement that the Iranians had rope-a-dope the Obama administration into between 2013 and 2015. So I think the Iranians are looking to use diplomacy as a tool to achieve that means of blunting again those Trump administration maximum pressure sanctions. And also, I think the Iranians understand so long as they're talking to America, the chances of Israel taking preemptive military action, particularly as we saw in that New York Times story where the administration was waving off preemptive military strikes by Israel, is not going to be happening. So that's why the regime is keen to keep making a hullabaloo of these talks. And on the American side, President Trump has been remarkably clear even before he campaigned, even as he campaigned to become president term one. He does not want the Islamic Republic of Iran to get a nuclear weapon. And we have to remember that he's been willing to put every option on the table, from diplomatic to economic to military, and he's acting on exactly what he's been saying. The question is, what framework is his team applying to achieve that? Are they just going to come and kick the can down the road with respect to a limited nuclear deal, or are they going to push for dismantlement?
I don't want to get too technical here, but as I mentioned, Iran has said that it does have every right to enrich uranium. Is there a legal basis for that? What does the international community really have to say when you look at that as a whole?
Well, before we, in general, before we get into the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, which the regime is a signatory of, it's important to note that rights in general come with responsibilities. And all countries have a right, if you will, if you're a member of the NPT, to civil nuclear energy, to make sure that even this highly dangerous dual use, powerful technology is only being used for energy, medical research, electricity generation, what have you. Today, the Islamic Republic has been enriching uranium for nearly 2 decades straight on its own territory. It was caught building nuclear facilities back in the early 2000s, and that's really what kicked off all these different shapes of these negotiations. And despite this entire drama, today less than 2% of the regime's electric grid comes from nuclear power. So all its stockpile of enriched uranium, all the stuff that it's been growing, all the places where it's been trimming and reducing the inspections and the monitoring of the International Atomic Energy Agency, all that stuff is just one gigantic question mark in Iran's legal case of, well, rights come with responsibilities. Why are you so keen on not living up to your responsibilities? Most importantly, in building on the Non-Proliferation Treaty, there's a governing document, the Additional Protocol. The regime has basically been in violation of not just the Additional Protocol, but the Safeguards Agreement to that for about 2 decades as well. So the regime is intent on talking about rights without talking at all about responsibilities. And even if one doesn't believe in rights or responsibilities, if you just look at the simple economics of the situation, there's a big question mark, which again, when you layer on the regime's ideology, its past history of obfuscation, its anti-Americanism, its anti-Semitism, the way in which it conducts its foreign and security policy, the picture doesn't look too good. And the case for the regime trying to build the world's most dangerous weapon actually becomes more and more apparent. So that's why Western policymakers have rightly looked at the regime with skepticism when it talks about rights.
Do we have a real idea of how close Iran is to actually having a full-fledged nuclear weapon?
Well, a full-fledged nuclear weapon requires putting three separate things, some of which the regime has mastered, some of which the regime has done before, some of which the regime is currently doing all together in one place. There's a delivery vehicle, which is most likely to be a ballistic missile. Iran has several classes of nuclear-capable ballistic missiles. There's the fissile material. Iran has been, since April 2021, enriching uranium to 60% purity. A country that can enrich uranium to 60% purity is more than 99% of the way to weapons grade uranium. Weapons grade uranium is technically considered 90+%. And that's because uranium enrichment is not linear. It's not like 60% to 60% of the way there. Uranium enrichment is logarithmic. That's why 60% is more so 99% of the way there to weapons grade fissile material. And then lastly is the weaponization, which is the regime's past attempts to actually develop a nuclear weapon in secret, the stuff that the Israelis captured in the atomic archive. If they decide to put this all together, experts say anywhere from 6 to 18 to 24 months. But you don't know what you don't know, because as the regime has been growing this nuclear program, it's again been limiting access, limiting monitoring, limiting information. And we need to marry what the International Atomic Energy Agency has been able to find out about Iran's nuclear program with the things that states have been able to find out about Iran's nuclear program through intel or through national technical means, to be able to have a full picture, to know what they can do and when they can do it. But most importantly for the audience, this is something that the intelligence community in the US has said has always been more of a political consideration rather than a technical consideration, because in so many ways, the cat might be already out of the bag.
My last question for you here. Oman has been the mediator here. We've had live images every Saturday for the past 3 Saturdays showing really the talks getting underway. Obviously not video inside, but outside as the different officials there were arriving. How has Oman been as a mediator overall? Because when you talk about between Israel and Hamas, we know there's been a lot of criticism about Qatar. So when you talk about the U.S. and Iran, how is Oman as a mediator?
Well, even going back way further than when the Qatar issue really raised its head, Oman has always looked to kind of position itself as the Switzerland of the Middle East, if you will, trying to mediate many times between the U.S. and the Iranians. Even going back to the Clinton administration, the Omanis have actually a very good view of not just the Islamic Republic, but the country of Iran itself, because it was the late Shah of Iran who actually helped restore the father of the current king of Oman, the current sultan of Oman, to his throne after a communist insurgency in the early 1970s. So there's good cross-Persian Gulf relations between Iran and Oman. And because of the U.S. force posture, because of the U.S. diplomatic history, and because of a very different style of government in Oman, Oman has had good relations with the West as well. But that doesn't mean everything is rosy. Oman has likely been a jurisdiction for weapons smuggling from the Iranians to the Houthis in Yemen, which are Iran's terrorist proxies in the Arabian Peninsula. There's lots of illicit finance questions when it comes to the banking of the Houthis in Oman. There's outstanding questions over why Oman is hosting so much of the Houthi political leadership also in their own country. And then there's longstanding question of how much Chinese investment in an era of great power competition should America worry about at some of Oman's ports? And this is not even at all beginning to touch the $1 million or the electric question when it comes to the pro-American side of the Persian Gulf, which is to what degree is this country knowingly or unknowingly facilitating Iran-based sanctions busting, whether through diversion or hawala or anything else. And that's where Oman is comparatively better than some other U.S. partners and allies like the UAE, for example. But still, we shouldn't be letting anyone off the hook.
All right. Ben and Ben Talablu there at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us as always here. Anything else you want to add? Anything I missed before I let you go?
No, I would say keep your eyes on the prize. And as we come up to next week and potentially have those reports confirmed about when the fourth round will take place, it's important to note that on May 8th, next week, it will be, I think, the 7th anniversary of the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA. The U.S. left that agreement in May 8, 2018, and that's when the Trump administration began. It floated for the first time this maximum pressure policy in term one, and now we are back in term two, and we are looking at how these policies, how these economic sanctions, how these diplomatic overtures differ from term one. So it's a really interesting point of contrast for the viewers and anyone else interested in this issue, how term one differs from term two and how term one really builds on term two at the exact same time.
Ben and Ben Talablu, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.